When Caitlin Clark spoke about Madison Square Garden, she didn't reach for cliches. She reached for something deeper. You feel it during warm-ups, she said. It's in your legs. That kind of visceral observation isn't taught. It's lived. And on basketball night in America, she didn't sound like a guest. She sounded like the most prepared person on set, even surrounded by giants.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Reggie Miller's sharp wit, Isaiah Thomas's history, Tracy McGrady's storytelling. Clark held her ground without pushing, projected gravitas without needing to dominate. Her voice carried a kind of calm that made you lean in, not out. She wasn't there to be introduced. She was there to redefine what presence looks like on national TV. That's what made the contrast so stark. While parts of the WNBA Players Association were entangled in zero-sum CBA demands and counterproductive internal politics, Clark modeled an entirely different approach. Her tone was constructive. Her vision was shared growth. And her track record, Nike's biggest rookie deal, Gatorade, sellout crowds, new franchises, gave her more than credibility. It gave her leverage, not as a disruptor, but as a builder, not by demanding a seat at the table, but by designing a better one. Caitlin Clark didn't just show up on basketball night in America. She rewrote the rules of who gets to speak with authority in basketball media. Standing under the bright lights of Madison Square Garden, flanked by NBA royalty like Reggie Miller, Isaiah Thomas, Tracy McGrady, Carmelo Anthony, and Jamal Crawford, Clark wasn't just a rookie on set. She was the center of gravity. What was supposed to be a light segment turned into something far more powerful. This wasn't a pat on the back. Good job for making an appearance. This was a redefining moment, one where the wall between men's and women's basketball media didn't get bridged. It got dismantled. From the moment she launched into her breakdown of NBA gameplay, citing Luka Doncic as a strategic influence, it was clear she wasn't there to nod along politely. She brought insight that went beyond surface level. She talked about Luka's spatial control, how he manipulates defenders without relying on athleticism, how he slows the game down to his tempo. Then she flipped it and explained how she's applying that exact mindset to her own evolution, recognizing her early tendency to avoid contact, and now working to absorb it and occupy space. That kind of insight isn't something you get from a media coach. It comes from hours in the film room, from studying elite players and turning that knowledge inward. Clark didn't just mention Luka to sound smart. She made the connection between his strengths and her growth with surgical precision. That level of cognitive engagement with the game isn't common. Not in the NBA, not in the WNBA, and certainly not among rookies. And then came the NBC game, a spin-on horse, against Jamal Crawford. You know, Jamal, elite handle, street ball legend, microwave scorer Crawford. They start trading logo range threes, trick shots, and casual banter like it's just another day in the gym. Clark didn't look nervous. She looked like she was having fun. But more than that, she looked like she belonged. Shot for shot, moment for moment, she proved that the gap isn't about gender. It's about skill. And she has it. You could see it on the faces of the veterans. They weren't patronizing her. They weren't humoring her. They were genuinely impressed. But the real takeaway wasn't just the shooting display or the on-air composure. It was the way Clark's presence changed the tone of the entire broadcast. She brought depth without arrogance. She broke down complex basketball concepts in a way that was both accessible and elite. When she talked about Madison Square Garden, she didn't recycle buzzwords. She talked about the way it feels during warm-ups, the physiological response players get when the energy in the building shifts. It wasn't theater, it was lived experience. That's what made the moment resonate. It wasn't just a cool cameo, it was a shift in who's allowed to narrate the game. And all of this was happening while parts of the WNBA's internal dynamics were unraveling. Back in the league, certain veterans were pushing for a collective bargaining agreement that asked for 30% of gross revenue, a number that doesn't align with the WNBA's current financial structure. The league still relies on NBA subsidies. It's still developing its revenue streams. And yet, while these demands were making headlines, those same players were engaging in behavior that undermined the league's growth. fouling Clark aggressively, downplaying her accomplishments, and even exploring rival leagues during negotiations. Clark could have responded defensively. She could have clapped back. Instead, she stayed constructive. Every time she was asked about the CBA discussions, she pivoted to league expansion, rising attendance, and a shared opportunity for everyone. She emphasized progress, not grievance. She modeled what leadership looks like when the stakes are high and the spotlight is bright. And that leadership, it's backed by numbers. Nike gave her the largest rookie deal in WNBA history. Gatorade followed. New sponsors entered the fold. New fans came through the gates. Attendance records broke. 2 new WNBA teams were announced. Clark's not just growing the game. She's reshaping its economic model. And she's doing it without demanding center stage. She earns it every time she steps on the floor or behind a mic. Her impact isn't personal. It's systemic. Her endorsements have helped elevate the league's salary cap, broadened sponsorship categories, and attracted companies that had never invested in women's sports before. That money doesn't just benefit her. It lifts the league. It improves training facilities, expands support staff, and raises the baseline for everyone, including the players criticizing her rise. There's a philosophical split happening right now in the WNBA. One side sees the league as a system that needs cultivation, long-term investment, and shared stewardship. The other side treats it as a battleground for leverage, chasing short-term wins without a sustainable path forward. Clark made her position crystal clear. She believes in the product on the floor. She believes that value comes from performance, not just negotiation. And that belief is why her NBC appearance mattered so much. It wasn't just about a good media moment. It was about credibility earned through execution. She spoke like someone who understands the responsibility of her platform, who understands that the future of the league isn't going to be built on slogans. It's going to be built on excellence. Her rise has nothing to do with tokenism and everything to do with undeniable talent. She's not asking for a seat at the table. She's redesigning the table. Clark's presence on national TV wasn't a crossover. It was a realignment. It forced analysts, networks, and fans to ask themselves why someone like her hadn't been there sooner. And now that she's here, it's going to be very hard to go back to the old model. She has made the case, verbally and visually, that basketball excellence can't be confined by league lines, gender labels, or outdated hierarchies. She's not bridging the gap between the WNBA and NBA. She's making that gap irrelevant. And the fact that she's doing it all while maintaining composure, humility, and insight, that's what makes her dangerous. Because she's not just elevating herself, she's elevating the game. From Iowa standout to WNBA Rookie of the Year to NBC primetime analyst, all in under 3 years. That's not a rise. That's a paradigm shift. And it's not ending anytime soon. So if you're paying attention, and you should be, make sure you like the video, share it, drop your take in the comments, and hit that subscribe button. Because the next time Caitlin Clark steps into the spotlight, it won't be a surprise. It'll be the standard. At this point, calling Caitlin Clark's NBA on NBC debut a highlight undersells it entirely. This wasn't just a career milestone, it was a cultural checkpoint. A full-circle, high-visibility moment where a WNBA rookie didn't simply appear on the biggest basketball broadcast in America. She owned it. With intelligence, with composure, with technical mastery, and without any gimmicks. It started with the segment, but it didn't end there. What made this moment seismic was that Caitlin Clark wasn't presented as a novelty or a guest to be politely acknowledged. She was treated, and more importantly, acted like a peer. Sitting among NBA icons, her presence was calm, assertive, and intellectually commanding. And that wasn't charity. That wasn't good optics. That was earned. From the second she started speaking, you could feel it. No fluff, no over-explaining, no talking in circles, just clear, high-level analysis that cut through the noise. She went straight into the mechanics of Luka Doncic's game. Not because it's trendy to name-check him, but because she studied him. Because his mastery of tempo and space has shaped the way she now approaches her own game. She didn't just say, "I like Luka." She explained why, how his ability to slow the game down forces defenders to react on his terms, how he absorbs contact without flinching, how he turns cerebral play into dominance without relying on sheer athleticism. And then she connected it directly to her own development. She said it plainly, "I used to run away from contact. Now I'm learning to take it, stay grounded, and use space." That's not player talk. That's coach-level reflection. That's film room detail. And coming from a rookie on live TV, that's rare. Extremely rare. But it didn't stop there. The segment rolled on, and then came the now iconic game of NBC against Jamal Crawford. A spin on horse, but elevated with flair, banter, and big-time shot selection. Logo threes, off-balance footwork, one leg fades. And the thing is, Clark didn't just hold her own against Crawford. She looked like she'd been doing this forever. Laughing, talking trash, dropping bombs from distances most players wouldn't even attempt during warm-ups. That wasn't just skill. That was comfort. She belonged there, and everyone knew it. Let's be clear, this kind of crossover isn't normal. We've seen women athletes featured in guest spots or short appearances. But Caitlin wasn't there to be celebrated. She was there to participate, to contribute, to elevate. Her segment wasn't carved out for novelty. It was part of the show's core rhythm. And behind all of that poise and precision, there's a storm brewing in the background. The WNBA's internal dynamics are cracking under the pressure of a changing landscape, and Clark is at the epicenter. While she's making history on network television and securing the largest endorsement deals in league history, some WNBA veterans are lobbying for a CBA that demands 30% of gross revenue. And yes, on paper, that might sound like progress. But the reality? The numbers don't match. The league still operates at a loss. It still leans heavily on NBA funding. It's not financially independent. Not yet. And while that conversation unfolds, a more uncomfortable dynamic is surfacing. On the court, Clark has been met with excessive fouls, open dismissals, and visible tension from players who see her rise as a threat instead of an opportunity. It's not just physical, it's political. There's resentment bubbling under the surface, and it's showing. But here's the part that matters. Clark hasn't responded in kind. She hasn't lashed out. She hasn't called anyone out. She hasn't gone on a media tour to defend herself. Instead, she's doubled down on the vision. She keeps pointing to league expansion, from 12 to 14 teams and growing. She talks about record-breaking attendance, about how her endorsements aren't just individual wins, but structural boosts to the salary cap, about how visibility brings revenue, and revenue brings sustainability. It's not spin, it's strategy. She's not trying to win the news cycle. She's trying to future-proof the league. And frankly, her results speak louder than any debate. Let's not forget, her Nike deal is the biggest rookie contract in WNBA history. Her Gatorade partnership opened doors for sponsorship categories the league had never accessed before. And those deals didn't just benefit her. They raised the bar for everyone. They brought new dollars into the ecosystem. Dollars that improve training conditions, expand marketing reach, and elevate every player's earning potential. That's the part critics keep missing. Clark's commercial success isn't just personal. It's systemic. It's a multiplier. And she knows it. That's why her messaging stays consistent. She talks about collective growth, about shared opportunity, about how strong leadership requires more than making demands. It requires creating value. Contrast that with some of the louder voices in the WNBPA who've chosen a more adversarial posture, who frame negotiations as a zero-sum game, who treat visibility as a threat to the status quo. The difference in tone couldn't be more stark. Clark isn't just outperforming expectations. She's redefining the model of what leadership in women's basketball looks like. And here's the thing about her debut on Basketball Night in America. It didn't feel like a one-off. It felt like a preview. Because the truth is, she fits. She didn't need special treatment. She didn't need a pre-packaged narrative. Her knowledge of the game, her communication style, her on-court resume, all of it fits seamlessly into the media spaces that used to feel off-limits for WNBA players. She doesn't make you think she's great for a WNBA player. She makes you think she's great. Period. And that's the whole point. Caitlin Clark is dissolving the division, not challenging it, not climbing it, dissolving it, quietly, consistently, and with excellence. She didn't show up demanding a seat at the table. She made the table irrelevant. Because when you bring this level of value, insight, and impact, you are the table. Her presence on NBC proved something networks, leagues, and fans needed to see with their own eyes. That a WNBA player can carry primetime NBA media content. Not as a gimmick, not as a guest, but as a full contributor. As someone with the knowledge, credibility, and poise to elevate the conversation. This isn't about checking boxes anymore. It's about excellence, wherever it comes from. And Caitlin Clark? She's delivering it across every platform she touches. So what comes next? Expansion, integration, a reimagining of how we define basketball authority. The silos are cracking. The assumptions are breaking down. The hierarchies are being questioned, not because someone tweeted about it, but because someone like Caitlin Clark made those barriers look ridiculous by simply walking through them and thriving. Her journey, from Iowa icon to WNBA Rookie of the Year to national broadcast analyst, didn't happen by accident. It happened because she matched elite-level skill with elite-level preparation, emotional intelligence, and business acumen. And when all of that shows up in one person, you don't gatekeep them. You elevate them. And in doing so, she's forcing the rest of the system to evolve. Networks have to think differently. Owners have to think differently. Sponsors have to think differently. Because the old narratives don't work anymore. Not when someone like Clark exists in real time, proving the model outdated every time she speaks. She doesn't beg for inclusion. She makes her relevance obvious. This is what it looks like when a singular talent intersects with a moment of cultural shift. And Caitlin Clark is navigating it not with ego, but with clarity. Not with aggression, but with conviction. She's not asking to be the future of basketball media. She already is. Caitlin Clark's rise hasn't just disrupted basketball. It's disrupted the way basketball is talked about, packaged, and sold. When she stepped on NBC's Basketball Night in America, she didn't just add value to a broadcast. She challenged the broadcast to meet her level. And what's wild is that this entire shift happened not through controversy or scandal or some overproduced media stunt. It happened through composure, precision, and substance. And that's probably the part that's catching the old guard off balance. Because Clark didn't get here by playing loud. She got here by playing well. What she demonstrated at Madison Square Garden, on national TV, next to icons, is that the next generation of basketball commentary might not come from the places people expect. It might come from the WNBA, from a player who not only understands how the game is played, but how it evolves, who doesn't just analyze the action, but contextualizes it with strategic nuance and player-level detail. It's that rare blend of game, IQ, and communication clarity that most networks spend years trying to develop in their analysts. Clark walked in with it fully formed. The way she spoke about Luka Doncic wasn't just impressive, it was elite. Not because she admired his game, but because she'd clearly spent time studying the nuances of it. She broke down his ability to slow down defenders, to make the court feel wider than it is, to use angles instead of explosion. And then she laid bare her own development, how she used to shy away from contact and now actively works to use it to her advantage. That's a kind of transparent growth mindset that's rare, even among players who've been in the league for a decade. You could tell she wasn't trying to sound insightful. She is insightful. That's the difference. She's been doing the homework, breaking down film, applying concepts, tweaking her own game. And it translates not just on the court, but on the mic. She's internalized the highest levels of basketball thinking and turned it into something accessible without dumbing it down. That's what makes her dangerous. And then there's the Jamal Crawford moment. That NBC game was supposed to be a fun, light segment, a moment of levity. But it also became a subtle power shift. Because Clark didn't just shoot for fun. She shot with that signature long-range confidence, casually draining logo threes and trick shots like it was a regular Tuesday. Her body language was loose. Her energy was high, but her form? Lethal. And Jamal knew it. You could see it in his smile. This wasn't just a rookie messing around. This was a peer competing and delivering. Shot for shot, laugh for laugh, she proved that her game doesn't shrink under lights. It glows brighter. But none of this lives in a vacuum. What Clark did in that studio, how she carried herself, what she said, how she said it, landed against the backdrop of a league currently wrestling with its own identity. Because while she's growing the WNBA's visibility, adding millions of new viewers, locking down major sponsorships, and driving attendance to record highs, there's friction. The kind of internal friction that surfaces when legacy meets momentum. And it's coming in the form of a CBA negotiation that, for some, feels increasingly detached from reality. There's nothing wrong with advocating for better conditions. In fact, it's essential. But there's a difference between pushing for sustainable growth and making demands that ignore the financial ecosystem of the league. A 30% revenue ask sounds bold, until you look at the books and realize the revenue still requires NBA backing. Until you realize that Clark's individual impact is bringing in sponsorships that have literally helped raise the salary cap for everyone. And instead of celebrating that, some players have responded by fouling her aggressively, dismissing her success, and treating her rise as if it's a threat to their legacy rather than a boost to their opportunity. But Clark hasn't fed that fire. She stayed calm, professional, focused on the big picture. She talks about expansion, about the next 4 teams on the horizon, about how rising tides lift all boats. It's clear that she sees the WNBA not just as a career, but as a platform to be protected, grown, and modernized. She's not just navigating a league. She's modeling a vision. And NBC didn't just give her a mic because she's hot right now. They gave her the mic because she's better than most people holding one. Period. She brings detail without jargon, emotion without sentimentality, intelligence without ego. That's the future of sports broadcasting, and Caitlin Clark brought it to the table on her first major national appearance. She wasn't trying to fill space. She was shifting space. The effect of that performance is going to echo in broadcast meetings, in production rooms, in executive offices trying to figure out how to make basketball feel fresh again. Because if the best person to explain what's happening on an NBA court is a WNBA rookie, then maybe the entire hierarchy of who gets to tell these stories is overdue for an overhaul. She didn't say that out loud. She didn't need to. She showed it. With every word. With every breakdown. With every shot she drained from 30 feet out. She isn't asking to be the exception. She's proving the rule is broken. And if the industry is paying attention, which it should be, this moment won't be a one-off. It'll be the start of something bigger. More appearances. More analysis. More pressure on networks to move past their old formulas. More pressure on players across leagues to not just play well, but think well. Speak well. Grow well. Because Caitlin Clark has set a new bar. And whether people like it or not, it's not coming down. If you've been following this from the beginning, or even if you're just now catching on, make sure you hit like, share this with someone still clinging to the old playbook, comment with your thoughts on how this changes the game, and subscribe so you don't miss the next seismic shift. Because Caitlin Clark's story is not just a good headline, it's a turning point, and we're all witnessing it live.